Masechet Baba Batra Daf Kafchet. We begin the third perek, Chezkat Habatim. A little intro. The word chazakah can be used in two different ways. There is a chazakah that is a form of acquisition. If I want to acquire a field, so I have to do some act in order for the possession to be transferred. And one of the ways of doing that is chazakah, which means I go into the field and I use it in some way. I close the gate, or plant something. I use it in a way that an owner would do so, and then the ownership transfers. We're not talking about that type of chazakah here in this perek, but rather chazakah, which is a proof of ownership, not a form of acquisition, of transferring it, but a proof that I own it. As we will see, in order to prove that I own the field against someone who claims otherwise, let's say a previous owner comes and says, hey, that's my field. You stole it. So I could provide a deed that I bought it. A deed is good. That's all I need. But if I don't have a deed, then I can, if I'm there for, we'll see how long, 3 years, and I have a claim, a ta'ana, I explain how I got it. I say, I bought it from you, and I'm here for 3 years, and you didn't protest all those 3 years. In that case, if I have a ta'ana, I have an explanation, you gave it as a gift, I inherit it. If I explain how I got it, and I've also been there for 3 years and it was not contested, then those two things together serve as proof that it's mine and no one else can take it away from me. Chezkat habatim v'habodot v'hashichin v'hame'arot v'hashabachot v'hamerchasa'ot u'bet habadin u'bet hashedachin v'havadim v'chol shehu oseh perot tadir chezkatan shalosh shanim miyom liyom. The following items are used on a regular basis. They make fruit all the time. Either make fruit or they have some use. They produce things on a regular basis. In order to prove ownership in those cases, I have to be using them for 3 years, precisely from day to day. We can call it 36 months. In order for that to be proof, and that along with a ta'ana will mean that it's mine, and a previous owner or someone else who has some claim cannot take it away from me. So this applies to homes. A home is a place where you go and you live every day. If I live in a certain home, if I do some squatting there and have no claim to it, then you can kick me out. But if I have a claim, I bought it from you, where's my deed? I lost the deed. I don't have to keep a deed forever. You can't expect that from me. If I'm here for 3 years and the previous owner no one else contested it, then that means that obviously they don't care too much about it. That means it's mine. Okay, so that applies to homes. It applies to a cistern or ditches or caves that are useful for collecting water or other things. And I'm using it for 3 years on a daily basis and no one said anything. Or a dovecote or a bathhouse or an olive press or an irrigated field, as opposed to a non-irrigated field, as we will see. An irrigated field, because it has irrigation, it can produce fruit at any time, all the time during the year. And slaves and anything that can produce fruit or whatever it produces, if it's a usage as a bathhouse, that I rent out and I charge people to come to the bathhouse, so that has income all the time, all year round. So I have to have usage of it for 36 months. The idea is that it's not just that amount of time, but it's 3 usages, and the usage here is defined as a full year because it's used all the time. Sedeh haba'al chezkata shalosh shanim ve'ena miyom liyom. This is different from a non-irrigated field. That depends on rain. Because it depends on rain, it's not usable all year round. It's dependent on the rain season. I have to plant it before, I wait till the rain, wait for things to grow. So it's not usable all year round. So that also will be 3 years, but it's not from day to day. It's not a full 36 months, but rather 3 harvests. Whenever the harvests are for whatever particular thing I'm planting, and for the 3 rain seasons. So again, it's 3 usages. So if it's something that produces all year round, that's 3 full years. If it's something that produces during certain seasons, then it's 3 harvests, 3 usages. Rabbi Yishmael omer, shelosha chodashim barishona, shelosha ba'acharona, u'shtem asar chodesh ba'emsa, hareh shemona asar chodesh. A simple reading of the Mishnah is that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva are arguing about this phrase when you say a non-irrigated field is not a full 3 years, well then how long is the minimum in order to make a chazakah? And Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva have different definitions of what it would be. So Rabbi Ishmael says, you need at least 3 months at the end of 1 year, and 3 months at the beginning of the 3rd year, and 12 months in between, for a total of 18 months. The idea is that in a non-irrigated field that depends on rain, you can plant certain crops in a certain way that you can get a harvest at the end of 1 year, and then in the 2nd year, whatever, you have a harvest anytime during that year, and then you can time it that you'll get a harvest at the beginning of the 3rd year. And so that all you would need is 18 months consecutively of usage, but that counts for a chazakah, because it's not 3 years necessarily, it's 3 usages. So if it's a irrigated field that can be used all year round, then you need full 3 years. But if it's a type of field that can only be used at certain times, well then it's enough to get 3 harvests, and you can manage to fit 3 harvests into 18 months. Rabbi Akiva Omer, חודש בראשונה וחודש באחרונה ו12 חודש באמצע, הרי 14 חודש. Rabbi Akiva says it's actually possible to produce a crop in 1 month at the end of the 1st year, and also 1 month in the beginning of the 3rd year. And then you have the entire year in between, so that's a total of 14 months. So you can actually get a chazakah on a non-irrigated field, one that depends on rain, in just 14 months. Amar Rabbi Ishmael, Bameh debrim amurim b'stei lavan, aval b'stei ilan, kanaset tebu'ato, umasaket zetav, kanaset keso, hare elu shalosh shanim. It looks like the sages here are each trying to one-up the other on how short you can make a chazakah. Rabbi Ishmael said 18 months, Rabbi Akiva says 14 months, and Rabbi Ishmael now qualifies his original statement and says, I can find a way of making a chazakah in certain cases even shorter. When I said 18 months, that was talking about a white field, means a grain field. The grains, that's the minimum you can get, is you can get a certain grain at the beginning of the year, one at the end of the year, and then you can get 18 months. But if you're talking about fields of trees, so then if you have different trees of different fruits that ripen at different times of the year, then you can get an entire chazakah within 1 year. So if you harvest your olives for produce, that might be tibuato. It seems not to be talking about grain, because we just said this is not a stelaban. So this might be talking about grapes. So if you brought in your grapes and your olives, and ketso is figs, then that's the same as 3 years, because you had 3 different harvests. Even though they were all within a 12-month period, you used it 3 times, and that's it. It's 3 usages, and you can have that within 1 year, because this is 3 different usages, because it's 3 different species that ripen at 3 different times. That's the end of the Mishnah. Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, שמעתי מהולכי אושה שהיו אומרים, מניין לחזקה 3 שנים, משור המועד, מה שור המועד? כיוון שנגח 3 נגיחות, נפק למחזקת תם, וקם בחזקת מועד, החנמה, כיוון דאכלה תלת שנין, נפק לה מרשות מוכר, וקיימה לה ברשות לוקח. Rabbi Yochanan cites the sages of Usha. Usha was a town in the Galilee. It was a very important town because the Sanhedrin, the council of the sages, moved there from Judea after the Bar Kokhba revolt. After the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Romans said, no more Jews in Judea, in the south. If we leave them near Jerusalem, they're just going to rebel again. And so the sages had to move up north. So this was an important town of study. And they used to say, how do we know that a chazakah is 3 years? What's the source? And it said we can learn it from the law of a forewarned ox, shor hamu'ad. Just like a forewarned ox. How does that ox become forewarned? Once it gores 3 times, then it leaves the status of being an innocuous ox, a shor tam, and it becomes a shor mu'ad. In other words, when it's born, we consider it a shor tam. That's its status. And then it gores once. Okay, gores twice. It gores 3 times. So all before that, between the 2nd goring and the 3rd goring, it was still called a shor tam. Once it gores the 3rd time, 3 times, that's it. 3 strikes, you're out. Now it changes its status to a shor mu'ad. So, and he uses the word chazakah here, right? So this is a presumption, and said then a presumption now that it's dangerous, and therefore the owner has to take special care of it, and it makes a difference if when it's shortam, he only has to pay half damages, and when it's muad, then the owner has to pay full damages. And so too here, once a person consumes a field for 3 years, then it leaves the presumptive status of the seller, and now it enters into the presumptive status of the buyer. And here, even though it sounds like it's moving from the possession of one to the other, it's not being used as a form of acquisition, that he now acquires it. He had to have acquired it in some way, bought it, got it as a present, something, some legal way of getting it. But now the presumption changes, right? Unless someone has proof otherwise, then it will remain in his possession. Okay, now we question this proof. Hold on, it's not the same, because a shora mu'ad, the owner only has to pay once that ox gores for a 4th time. Then he has to pay a full amount. The first 3 times, he paid half an amount, and then the 4th time, after it gores the 4th time, then he has to pay full amount for that time. So it's really the 4th time that is where we see the difference manifest. And so too, it should be the 4th year. That's why he has to keep it for 4 years, and that's when we presume that it's his. So really it should be 4 according to that. But we reject this answer. No, that comparison between the 4th goring and the 4th year is not correct. In the case of goring, once it gores 3 times, that's it. Its status changes from shortam to shor mu'ad. Now, the fact that he doesn't have to pay is because it didn't gore yet. It didn't do any damage that he would have to pay. So what is he going to pay if it didn't gore yet? But even before it gores for the 4th time, it's called a shor mu'ad. We warn the owner, this is a shor mu'ad. You have to keep special care of it. If it gores again, you're going to have to pay a full amount. And so it's just a technicality, the fact that he doesn't have to pay until it actually goes and gores again. But the status already changes after the 3rd goring. And so that is the same as here, where once a person consumes a field for 3 years, then that's it. The status changes. It changes from presumptive ownership of the seller to presumptive ownership of this new guy who's living there, the buyer. Okay, based on this answer, we have a follow-up question that according to this, a chazakah, living somewhere for 3 years or using a field for 3 years, even without a claim, should make a chazakah, because an ox that gores 3 times automatically becomes a mu'ad. You don't have to do anything, it just kicks in automatically. And if we apply that to this case, once I'm there for 3 years, so then it becomes automatically that this is mine. Even if I don't have a claim, I don't even have to explain that, oh, you sold it to me, you gave it to me as a gift, I inherited it. Even without a chazakah, should work automatically. However, we know that's not true because the Mishnah later on says that any chazakah that doesn't have also a claim is not a chazakah. Just because I'm possession, I could be in possession of a house for 10 years, for 20 years. And some of the previous owner comes in and claims, what are you doing? Get out of my house. And if I say, well, I've been living here for 10 years, so therefore it's mine. That's not a claim. I have to explain how I got it, received it legally from you. I have to say that I bought it. Then the fact that I'm there for 3 years or more is just a proof that, and you didn't say anything about it the whole time, is just a proof that I'm right, that I bought it. So we see that we challenge the derivation of the people of Usha once again, because if it's really from shortam, then it should flip automatically, even without a ta'ana. And we explain the answer. No, the reason why you need a claim in the case of a chazakah is because we, the betin, the judges, say, maybe the guy who's squatting in this house is correct. Maybe it is his. But if he doesn't make a claim for himself, should we make a claim for him? Right? He has to give some explanation of how he got the house. It's not our job to fill in the argument for him. The judges aren't supposed to be lawyers, right? You come and say, okay, you claim it's your house. What's your argument? So he has to say, he can't just say, well, I've been living here for a long time. That's not an argument. This guy can prove that he lived in it before, that he owned it before you. So what's your claim? So we're not going to give him a claim. So yes, it will go, the 3 years happens automatically, that the presumption of ownership will flip automatically. But there has to come along with a claim of how we got it. Otherwise, he's admitting that he stole it. In effect, he's saying, well, I lived here for a long time. Therefore what? Therefore, it's proof that you really stole it. If you don't at least say, I got it in a legitimate way. Here is how I got it. So that's just a technicality that obviously he has to explain how he received it in the first place. And so now this is a good proof. Okay, another challenge against the proof of the people of Usha that we learn chazakah from a shor mu'ad. Matkif la Rav Avira ele me'ata mecha'a shelo befanav la teve mecha'a dumya de shor mu'ad ma shor mu'ad befanav ba'inan afacha name befanav ba'inan. Now, in order to make a protest, the previous owner, or if he's a legitimate owner, he thinks he is, in order to make a protest, he has to go to a bet din and say, listen, somebody is squatting in my house, and he's been doing this for 1 year, 2 years, however long, but it's really my house. He has to make a protest. Now, does he have to make a protest in front of the squatter? Well, it would seem from this comparison that if he makes a protest not in front of the squatter, then it's not valid. He would actually have to go to the squatter and tell him in his face, hey, you are living in my house, you need to get out. And why would we think that? Because we're making a comparison to Shor HaMu'ad. Just like in Shor HaMu'ad, testimony that this guy's ox gored someone has to be done to his face. The owner has to know that his ox gored 3 times. And so we have to go in front of the owner and say, listen, here, your ox gored 3 times. You are now forewarned that your ox is dangerous and you have to keep it on a special leash and you have to lock it up. Otherwise, you're going to be responsible. If he doesn't know about that, well, then how's he going to be warned to keep his ox safer? How could he be responsible? So, if you're really making this comparison that Rav Avira asked the people of Usha, then just like regarding an ox, the warning to the owner of the ox has to be in front of him. Then, so too, in the case of chazakah, the protest of the previous owner has to be in front of the face of the squatter. But that is not the halacha. The halacha is that he can just go, the previous owner can just go to bet din. So how can you explain this? And the answer is hatam ve'o'ad b'balav ketiv. Hacha chabrach chabra itle v'chabrav de chabrach chabra itle. Now it's different because in the case of Shor Mu'ad, the pasuk goes out of its way to say that the warning has to be in front of its owner. You have to tell the warning to the owner of the ox to his face. That's a special law that has to be to his face. But in terms of getting the word out, in the case of the house, there is a principle that a friend has a friend, and that friend himself has another friend, as long as the previous owner makes a protest in bet din, which is the same as making it in public, because someone's going to hear about what's going on in the court, and they will tell a friend, and even if that particular friend doesn't know the squatter, surely he has an acquaintance who knows the scholar. There's just, 2-3 degrees of separation between any people in a village, and therefore, as long as he makes a protest and it will get to the squatter in some way, that's sufficient. So then the squatter knows, someone is protesting, I have to go deal with this. That's all he has to do. But really, this derivation is correct because the case of Shor Mu'ad is just a special gezerat hakatuv of the pasuk. Now we ask, Ul Meir Damar, Richek negichotav chayav, kerev negichotav lo kol sheken, achala tilata pere bechad yoma, kegon te'ena leve chazaka. Now we ask, according to the Bi Meir, who says regarding Shor Mu'ad, that not only is a Shor Mu'ad become Mu'ad if it gores on 3 separate days, that's the other opinion, that it has to be 3 separate days, that Rabbi Meir says, if when they're far away at long intervals between each goring, he becomes a shor mu'ad and he'll be liable to pay full, that when they're close together, let's say all on the same day, the ox gores in the morning, midday, and the afternoon, so all the more so, it becomes a shor mu'ad. If we follow Rabbi Meir and we transfer that comparison to a chazakah, then that would mean not only is it a chazakah, if I use it 3 times spread over 3 years, it could be even 3 times in one day. For example, dates, figs. Figs can ripen in a short time, and it could be that there's figs that are not yet ripe in the morning, but by the afternoon they're ripe. And so, if I go and I collect some ripe figs in the morning, and then I come in the middle of the day, and some more figs get ripe, and I take those, and then in the afternoon, some more figs get ripe, and I take those, I can have a chazakah on someone's fig trees in one day. Because just like you can become a shor mu'ad in one day, so too, you should be able to make a chazakah in one day, right? It's 3 usages, and why can't they all be, if it's spread out, makes a chazakah, and the Rabbi Meir says all the more so on one day, so then I'm going to apply that here too. Is that possible? And we answer no. Dumya de shor mu'ad. Ma shor mu'ad bi'idana di'it leha negicha, leta leha negicha. Hachaname bi'idana di'ita lahai pera, leta lahai pera. No, even according to the Rabbi Meir, he would agree that you can't make a chazakah just on one day. Because it has to be, in order to be on one day, it has to be the same as a shor mu'ad. Just like with a shor mu'ad, at the time that it's goring, the next goring does not exist yet. It's involved in goring this person over here now, and the next goring, it didn't start yet. It's not like, it's goring as it's running and it gets 3 people, one after the other, like dominoes. It doesn't work like that. He's goring once, this action starts and stops. And the ox takes a break, and he's walking around. And then another incident happens in the afternoon, and then another incident. They're not happening simultaneously or overlapping. So yes, if it's 3 separate events in one day, then that makes a shor tam into a shor mu'ad. But here, that's not so. When these figs are around, the other figs are also around. Even though if they're not totally ripe yet, but they exist, they're right there on the tree next to me. And so that's why it does not make a chazakah unless you have these figs or whatever crop it is, I collect them, and the next one doesn't yet exist. And then I plant, and the next one starts growing and finishes, and I take them. And I do that before the next crop stops growing. Has to be 3 different events that with no overlap in order for there to be a chazakah. We now have a follow-up question. Achala telata pere betilata yome kegon salaf leve chazakah. According to Rabbi Meir, you can have a case where you consume or harvest a produce for 3 days in a row, where it did not exist the day before. For example, a caper bush. Would that make a chazakah? Here's a caper bush, here's the caper flowers, and the caper fruit. Capers grow pretty quickly. Not overnight, but the fruit is very, very small, and in one day, it can grow into something that is ripe. And so, if I harvest capers 3 days in a row, then according to Bimei, would that make a chazakah? Because it did not exist on the day before. And we answer no. Hatam pera mihaite umigmarhu deka gamad ve'azil. Even on the day before, the fruit does exist, but it's not yet finished. It's just very small, but it is there, and therefore it does not fit the principle of just like shor mu'ad when it's goring this animal. The next event has not happened at all. Didn't even start yet. There can't be any overlap. But here there is overlap because the caper bush that you're going to get tomorrow does exist now, and therefore it cannot be chazakah because it's not 3 separate events. There is overlap in the existence of the caper fruits. All right, we try again. Achala telata pere betilatin yomeh kegon aspasta leve chazakah. Well, I could come up with a case where you have 3 harvests within 30 days, like alfalfa. Now, alfalfa has 2 properties that are going to be important for this question and the next one. First of all, it grows relatively quickly. and it's about a 1 month cycle, right? You grow it, and then 1 month later, then you take it all away, and then you grow another one every 30 days. Second, which is relevant now, is that within the 30 days, you can cut a little bit and then it'll grow more. And then you cut a little bit and it continues to grow. So if you have an alfalfa plant and you're consuming it, you can get 3 different crops from it within 30 days. Would that be a chazakah? That means you own that land where the alfalfa is? We ask, what exactly is the case? So how are you using it? Is it that it grows a little and you cut it and consume it, and then you destroy it and plant it again, and then you let it grow a little, just say for a few days, and you do this right for 10 days, and you cut a little, and then you replant it, and another 10 days, another 10 days. So within 30 days, you can have 30 different crops, and there's no overlap because you destroy the alfalfa plant before, and you regrow it, and within 30 days, you can get a little bit of growth. So would that be the case? But that would not work because that is called seizing and consuming. It's not the normal way of farming it. This is like you're trying to hide something. And this is not, if you really owned the land, you wouldn't do that. You would let the alfalfa grow for 30 days and you'd prune it and take a little bit at a time, but you'd let it grow till 30 days. People don't let it grow for 10 days and then destroy it. It's evident that you're trying to get around something. You're trying to get 3 different harvests from 3 different plants within 30 days, but that as a normal owner wouldn't do that, and therefore that does not show a chazakah. So it can't be that you're using it like that. Rather, the minimum we can find is achalat telata pere bitlata yadche. First we tried 3 days in a row, then we tried 30 days, but now we say, okay, 3 months, we can find a scenario. Kegon aspasta leve chazaka. Again with alfalfa. And here you have an alfalfa plant. It grows for 30 days and you harvest it, and that's the normal way. And then you grow another one after that on the same land for 30 days, and then another one after that for 30 days. This is the normal way of harvesting alfalfa. And they're 3 separate crops, 3 separate events. There's no overlap of one to the other. So you'd have to admit that according to the Bimeir, this would be a chazakah. And we answer, yes, indeed. Man holche usha Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael hacha nameh. Yes, according to the argument of the people of Usha, who derive the law of chazakah of fields from Shor HaMu'ad. And just like Shor HaMu'ad, even if it's 3 on the same day, that doesn't matter how much time span there is. According to the Bimeir, within the Bimeir, that 3 you can even do a very short time span as long as it's 3 separate events. Yes, according to him, then if you apply that to a chazakah, it can be a relatively short time span as long as there's no overlap. The fastest example we could find for that is alfalfa over the course of 3 months. And can you make a chazakah within 3 months? Didn't we say 3 years? And we had, 18 months. We saw 14 months. But can you do it even within 3 months? And the answer is yes, because we're following the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. And Rabbi Ishmael at the end of the Mishnah said that you can make a chazakah with 3 harvests even within 1 year. Ditnan, Rabbi Ishmael Omer. B'amet, Rabbi Morim b'steh halavan, ava b'steh ilan, kanaset tebuato. Masaket zeta v'chanaset keso, hare elu 3 shanim. For a field of grain, there you need, according to Bishmael, 18 months, because that's the minimum amount of time. You need 3 months, and then 12, and then 3 months for grain. But if it's an orchard, then you can get 3 different crops of 3 different things, of grapes, of olives, and of figs within 1 year, and that's permitted. And that's the same as 3 years that makes a chazakah. And so therefore, the people of Usha are in agreement with Rabbi Ishmael, and therefore, yes, indeed, if you would follow Rabbi Meir, who says that regarding Shor Mu'ad, you can do it within even 1 day, then for chazakah also, you can do it, well, the shortest we can find is a crop of alfalfa, which you can do within 3 months, and yes, that would be a chazakah, because there's no overlap between them. All right, fine. So far, we established that the proof of Usha, the source that the people of Usha gave, only works for Rabbi Ishmael. So now we ask L'Rabbanan Mai, the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Meir, and the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Ishmael and say, no, you can't do it within 1 year. You need it to span over 3 years. So what will be the source of their derivation? We need another source. Amar Rav Yosef, Kera ketib, sadot bakesef yiknu, vechato basefer vechatom, share navi omed be'eser umazhir al achat esre. Rav Yosef says we can learn it from a pasuk in Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah is speaking in the 10th year of Sidkiah's reign, and the exile is going to be in the 11th year of Chizkiah's reign. And so Yirmiyah knows, he says, that you're going to go into exile soon, right, over the course of this year and the next year. So altogether 2 years. And he gives the people a directive. Everyone should buy fields with money, and you should write a deed and seal up the deed and hold on to it. Yirmiyah's message was, even though we're going to exile and it's going to be a while, it's going to be 70 years, nevertheless, Hashem guarantees you're going to come back. And when you come back, you're going to want to have land. And you should be so sure, have so much trust that you're going to come back and own land, that, you know what, buy land now and hold on to the deed, because when your children or your grandchildren come back, they'll keep the deed with them and they can come back to this land. Otherwise, it would be a crazy investment to invest in land in a place that you're about to leave if you wouldn't think you were coming back. So Yirmiyah wants to impress upon the people, don't worry, exile will be temporary, you will come back, and therefore hold on to the deed. Now, why do they have to hold on to the deed? They have time to make a chazakah, right? The thing is that they only have 2 years, the 10th year and the 11th year, that the land that they buy, they can live on, but that's not sufficient to make a chazakah. We can learn from here that 2 years is not sufficient, but 3 years would be sufficient. So if they were there for 3 years, then they would not need a deed. They could say, oh, look, we are on this land for 3 years and we bought it, and then they wouldn't need the deed. So why is he telling them to keep the deed? Because they only have 2 years that they will live on the land. So that is the proof. Amar Abaye, Dilma Mashmalan. Abaye rejects Rav Yosef's proof. He says maybe Yirmiyah was giving them good advice, right? It's a good idea to hold on to a deed. Really, maybe a chazakah is only 1 year. You can make a chazakah. But then you have to go to court, you have to argue, I was there, I bought it, how do you know? Good advice is hold on to the deed. It'll make it much easier for you. When your grandchildren come back, then they won't have any legal problems. But doesn't mean that you have to, that a chazakah is for sure 3 years. And Abaye continues, if you don't say that Yirmiyah is simply giving good advice, he's not giving a legal directive, then what would you do with this pasuk, where Yirmiyah gives them advice about how they should live in exile? When you go to Bavel, build houses, dwell in them, plant gardens, and eat fruit from them. He's giving them advice that when they go to Bavel, they should settle in there, and know that they're going to be there for 70 years, and they should build strong communities, have families, build schools, and thrive as a Jewish community there, so that they'll survive, and then they'll be able to come back. Now, this is not a legal directive. It's not a mitzvah that they have to plant the garden in Bavel. He's telling them good advice, right? And so too, it makes sense that here, when he says hold on to the deed, it's only good advice. Ela aisa tova kamashmalan, hachaname aisa tova kamashmalan, teda dichtib un tam bichli chares leman yamdu yamim rabim. Just like regarding how they should live in Bavel was just good advice, so too that they should hold on to a deed is also simply good advice, not a strict halacha. And in addition, he proves that it's only good advice because Yirmiyah further says, take those deeds of the land that you're buying in Israel and put them in an earthenware vessel so that they will last a long time. We can prove that if you put something in an earthenware vessel, it does last a lot longer, because the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves, in Cave 1, they were in earthenware vessels, and they have been preserved almost perfectly for 2,000 years. Whereas in other caves, like cave number 4, they were not put in earthenware vessels, and they're all in just tiny little pieces on the floor. and just barely recognizable. So this is a lot of good advice. But here also, you're not going to say that it's a mitzvah when you buy the steed, hold on to it, and you have to put it in an earthenware vessel. No, he's giving them good advice. Listen, you're going to want to have it preserved for 70 years when you come back. This is a good idea to put it in an earthenware vessel. If you don't want to and you want to put it somewhere else, put it in a cupboard, put it somewhere safe. So since this is simply good advice, therefore the Yirmiyah's main statement of get deeds is simply good advice. And it could be that a chazakah can be done with 1 year. And so therefore there's no proof from here. So this proof doesn't work. And instead, Rava will offer a different source for chazakah being 3 years that we'll pick up on the next daf. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.